On August 20th, 2023, a Halo runner named Cambid pulled off the impossible, beating Halo Combat Evolved on Legendary in 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 11 seconds. That's the fastest that anyone has ever beaten Halo CE, on Legendary or any other difficulty. Watching Cambid's run, he's ridiculously good at CE itself, he has great strategies for dealing with different encounters, and of course, there's some insane tricks. When watching speedrunners do crazy tricks, a common question is, how did someone even find these tricks? And the answer is, it wasn't one person. Cambid's world record run is a culmination of 22 years of Halo CE speedrunning and development. Hundreds of people putting thousands and thousands of hours playing Halo, finding new tricks and shortcuts, all finally put together into the greatest Halo CE speedrun of all time. I'm a frog and a Halo CE runner myself, and in this video, we'll be looking at the history of Halo CE speedrunning and how we got to this point. Special thanks to GoRope, Chrono, Sloth SG, G-Pro, Joshington, and Cordy Axis for helping me put this video together and reviewing it for accuracy. And thanks to From the Grave for giving me the idea for this video in the first place. Let's hop in. Released November 15th, 2001, Halo CE is obviously one of the most popular and influential games of all time. A big part of what made Halo unique is that for a first-person shooter, players had a lot of freedom in how they approached the game. Between weapon selection, non-linear levels with different paths to take, your strategy for different encounters, there's no right way to play Halo. And with this level of freedom given to players, it didn't take long for the Halo faithful to start doing some, well, unintended things. The most famous example is Randall Glass's Warthog launch video from 2002, where he launches a Warthog and his own corpse all over the Silent Cartographer beach. But also in 2002, a few other things were discovered. For example, a player named Frog Blast, no relation, discovered a way to survive a fall to the ground on assault in the control room from the first bridge, and because of this skip, have no enemies for the remainder of the level. On the level Keys, it was found that you could use a shield at the start of the mission to get pushed into the ceiling and platform your way into the Keys room just a couple minutes into the level. But these discoveries remain more as just cool things you could show your friends rather than anything competitive. There were a few forum posts on the most popular fan site at the time, halo.bungie.org, where people would post their best times without any video. This started with a post from Astro the Space Duck, where they posted their best times and encouraged others to do the same. As a side note, Astro the Space Duck was actually a young Celestalon, who now works for Blizzard on Hearthstone. There was also a Bungie.net group called Halo at Lightning Speed, but unfortunately I couldn't find any archives of it, and the old post I found that references it mentions that it had been dead for the past few months. So for all intents and purposes, Halo speedrunning at that time wasn't really a thing in any serious capacity. That is until 2004. Halo.bungie.org hosted a contest called Going Nowhere Fast. It was a contest to beat each level of Halo as fast as possible on Legendary, and whoever submitted the fastest run of each level would get a prize. To use a speedrunning term, it was an IL, individual level competition. What's great about Going Nowhere Fast is that contestants had to submit video evidence of the runs, and these videos are all still available for us to look at. Because they're from 2004, they are potato quality, but they're still worth looking at. So let's do that. The winning time for Pillar of Autumn was 6 minutes and 8 seconds by Condor Man. His Pillar of Autumn run consists entirely of either clearing rooms as fast as possible or running past enemies. There really wasn't much in terms of tricks. There's a minor trick here where you can trigger the bridge cutscene early by entering the doorway and backing out, and in the room with the stairs, he did a grenade jump past all the enemies.
On the landing above us.
Otherwise, it's just good Legendary gameplay. Halo, the level's winning time was 15:29 by GWDPTO. It starts with crossing the bridge, killing some enemies, clearing out the dropships of the first area as fast as possible, and then the first trick. He parks his Warthog here, jumps on top of it, and runs to press the button to activate the light bridge, which would normally have an unskippable cutscene, but because the game considers the area unsafe, it never plays. Later, he picks up a sniper rifle, then heads to the first Marine rescue section at the rocks and snipes 3 Marines on top of the big rock. There are 3 areas where you're supposed to save Marines, but the game lets you progress even if they're dead, so it's faster to just kill them at the first 2 areas instead of saving them. So next he goes over to what we call River and runs over 1 Marine and picks up the other 2 as a gunner and passenger, which removes them from the encounter. This has the same effect as killing them, except he's not actually killing them. The last area, at Cliff, he has to clear regardless of whether the Marines are alive, so this time instead of killing them, he just clears the area and the level ends. Truth and Reconciliation was won with a winning time of 24:21 by Cody Miller. The ground combat is mostly just Cody clearing things as fast as he can, although in the 3rd section there is an active camo that he grabs to be able to run past enemies. Cody's first big trick happens inside the Covenant ship. After clearing out enemies, Cody does a couple of grenade jumps to get him from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor. From the 2nd floor, he's able to walk upstairs to the 3rd floor with no extra enemies spawned besides a single grunt that was already spawned while he was at the bottom. During the Keys escort at the end of the level in the bridge, after Keys and the Marines dialogue about escaping, the level ends early because of a trigger that was skipped by the earlier grenade jump. The ending skip wasn't very well understood at the time, and there were a few forum posts on halo.bungie.org wondering if Cody cheated the ending, but rest assured he did not. Silent Cartographer's winning time was 4:18 from Goat Rope. Goat Rope is a name you may recognize from the Goat Roped achievement in Halo MCC for beating CE on Legendary in under 3 hours. To start, Goat Rope runs the exact opposite direction of where he's supposed to go, grabs a Warthog, and drives to the first facility. Normally a door closes and you have to go to a different part of the island to open it, but Goat Rope does what's called a Warthog fling to push himself through the door before it closes. After doing the Warthog fling, Goat Rope shoots for a second to skip a cutscene and lands below in such a way that he takes almost no fall damage. After this drop, he does another drop onto an overshield and activates the Silent Cartographer just a couple minutes into the level. To get out, he grabs an active camo and runs as fast as he can to the top and gets past the enemies just as the camo is running out. After dispatching a gold elite and making it back to the surface, he waits around for Foehammer to pick him up, and that's the Silent Cartographer. Assault in the control room was won by Sean Orley with a time of 6:53, and this probably was the weirdest one of all. After fighting his way through the first room, Sean gets to the first bridge and does a series of falls that get him to the ground.
Copy. Over.
I didn't think there were any human forces left on this part of the ring.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
He then waits for a bit and hitches a ride on a pelican and jumps out by a ghost. Because of the bridge fall, there's no enemy, so he's able to make his way to the end with no problems. The first 5 levels of Halo CE were definitely more trick-heavy than the last 5 levels. 343 Guilty Spark won by Tristan Cahill with a time of 7:41, The Library by Cody Miller in 20:57, 2 Betrayals by Taylor Jones in 25:03, Keys in 13:18 by Goat Rope, and The Maw in 11:08 by Trevor Fitch are all pretty much just full-path playthroughs of each level with not a lot of tricks. There were still a few though. At the start of 343 Guilty Spark, Tristan went left and jumped on a rock to get to the facility faster, and after the second elevator did a trick called Camo Jump, or Camo Jumo for the typographically impaired. You're supposed to fall off and then fight through another couple rooms to get back up, but Camo Jump lets you avoid this and run through almost the entire facility while camouflaged. Towards the end of 2 Betrayals, you're in a Banshee and there's a door that breaks and you're supposed to proceed on foot, but Taylor backtracked a bit, grabbed a ghost, and got it through the door using the Banshee, which saved him a few minutes of walking and fighting. The Maw featured a 360 during the Warthog run that, besides looking cool, also ensures that the Warthog stays upright and doesn't flip. If done correctly, that is. I mess it up all the time. Library and Keys both had basically nothing in terms of tricks. I mentioned the shield bump trick on Keys earlier that let players get out of bounds and skip almost all the way to the end, but in 2004, this wasn't seen as a viable strat for a speedrun due to how difficult it was, hence the 13-minute time for Goat Rope. Going Nowhere Fast was an IL competition, but if you add these times together, they come to a full game time of 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 16 seconds, not counting a few minutes of unskippable cutscenes that would also be included in a true full game time. But now Halo speedrunning had an official start and a baseline for others to build on, and after the conclusion of Going Nowhere Fast, that's exactly what runners did. Following Going Nowhere Fast, Halo speedrunners started using the forums for a website called High Impact Halo. In early 2006, some of these runners, including Goat Rope, created a site just for Halo speedrunning called High Speed Halo. High Speed Halo posted speedrunning news, walkthroughs, community challenges, runs, and most importantly, allowed submissions and kept a list of the fastest Halo times. It started with just Halo 1 and 2, but as the years went by and more games were released, High Speed Halo would track these as well. As well as keeping records for Legendary, High Speed Halo also kept records for Easy, Normal, and Heroic. They also kept track of co-op runs. At this point, full game records weren't tracked because this was still early internet and uploading 2-hour runs wasn't really feasible. There were even mailing addresses added to the site at one point if you needed to send a VHS tape of your run. During this time, runners also continued using their section of the High Impact Halo forums for discussions. Backtracking a bit, on February 12, 2005, Cody Miller made a forum post on High Impact Halo. Unfortunately, it isn't archived, challenging Halo runners to get the total time for all Halo levels on Legendary down under 2 hours. That meant between all the records to this point, over 15 minutes needed to be cut. Progress started to be made almost right away. I don't have the exact dates, but in 2005, there were a few new records set. The Silent Cartographer was brought down to 3 minutes and 54 seconds by a new runner named Insidious. This run added a slightly different route on the escape to the surface and a new grenade jump. 343 Guilty Spark was cut down to 7:32 by a new runner named Spot Check, beating the Going Nowhere Fast time by 9 seconds. But biggest of all, Insidious cut the Going Nowhere Fast time for 2 Betrayals by nearly 8 minutes, bringing it all the way from 25:03 down to 17:23. The biggest change was the beginning. Rather than fighting his way down the pyramid like Taylor Jones did, Insidious took a path to the right and got in the first Banshee much faster. Otherwise, this level is still just full path with a ghost trick at the end. It's just done a lot faster and better. Worth noting, these times, Silent Cartographer in 343 Guilty Spark in 7:32, and 2 Betrayals in 17:23 would stay the world records on High Speed Halo for the entirety of its existence. How long that is exactly we'll get to in a bit. Also, Cody Miller cut Trevor's Maw time from 11:08 down to 9:15. This run featured a trick called Cafe Bump. There's 2 sets of doors that get bashed open by hunters, but if you stand in the corner of the set of doors on the right, you can get pushed out of bounds on top of the map. The issue is that without actually walking in the cafe yourself, the room is invisible when you're on top of it. It just looks like this. For this reason, Cafe Bump prior to this was a trick only done in co-op because player 1 could get out of bounds and player 2 could walk in the cafe to load it. But Cody's 915 Moss somehow pulled it off. He gets vision while out of bounds and was able to platform his way past the cafe, skipping part of the level, including the entire bridge section where you're supposed to have a cutscene. At the time, this was explained as just a super lucky glitch.
I don't know how it works, but it happens like 1 out of every 50 times, where if you're like crouching, you must like get inside this room and then it loads those graphics.
I don't know how you do it. That's why you still have the record.
Now it's time to talk about keys. Somewhere between 2005 and spring of 2006, GoRope managed to cut his 1318 keys all the way down to 923. The big time save here was after finding keys. Normally there'd be a massive fight with a ton of Flood and Spec Ops Covenant. In the Going Nowhere Fast run, GoRope not only did this fight, but died a couple times, setting him back even further. His new run had a strat for a quick exit using what's called a distraction grenade. Basically, you throw a grenade, and if the enemies see it before they notice you, they just stare at the grenade like idiots and you can run by, skipping this entire encounter. In March of 2006, a new runner named Skirty joined the forums, and on April 3rd of 2006, he made a post sharing something huge. I'll let you see it for yourself. He successfully pulled off a keys run using the shield bump and beat it under 3 minutes. He set an easy record of 2:39 and a legendary record of 2:50. Worth noting, Skirty wasn't the first to successfully do the shield bump in the run. The first record using it appears to have been spot checked with a legendary time of 4:13. Why exactly it was so much slower, I can't say because there's no video, but Skirty brought it down to 3:55, then 3:21, then 2:50. My guess is that this is a combination of being able to line up the trick faster and the platforming once out of bounds. Skirty may not have been the first person to use the shield bump, but he was the first person to get really good at it, and he single-handedly cut down the keys time by a lot. And this level for a really long time was Skirty's level. So that's why the MCC achievement for beating keys' part time is called Skirty Bump. 2006 also featured the entrance of a couple other notable new runners. The first was Slinky, who ran easy and set new easy records in 2006 for Pillar of Autumn, Truth and Reconciliation, and 343 Guilty Spark. The second was Riptor, who pushed the legendary times down even further. Riptor cut Pillar of Autumn to 5:19, Truth and Reconciliation to 16:51, Library down to 14:25, and Halo to 13:08. Riptor's Pillar of Autumn was simple. It had cleaner gameplay and was a bit riskier with clearing and running through the rooms. Riptor's Halo had 2 huge changes from the Going Nowhere Fast run. First, to start the level, instead of crossing the bridge, Riptor did a grenade jump which saves a couple seconds versus crossing the bridge, but more importantly skips a trigger. Normally there'd be 2 Banshees, a dropship, and a Covenant squad that spawn here, but instead it's empty and you can walk right through. Second, in the second half of the level where you're supposed to save Marines, Riptor starts with the cliff section rather than ending with it. The order he goes with is cliff, rubble, river, which is by far the fastest and what Halo runners still do now. Riptor's Truth and Reconciliation run unfortunately doesn't have a video anymore, but based on easy runs at the time, I can assume a couple things. First, in the hangar, he would have done what's called the triple grenade jump. Rather than doing Cody's grenade jump, which only took him to the second floor, he did this series of grenade jumps to get him to the top. The reason the first jump doesn't kill you is because you're invincible while the overshield is charging up. Second, during the Keys escort at the end, he would have killed some of his own Marines to turn Keys hostile. Like in Cody's run, the level ends early due to the grenade jump, but Keys being hostile means you don't even have to listen to the "We're screwed! We're screwed, man!" dialogue on the bridge first. The level just ends almost immediately. Riptor's library had one big strat not seen in the original Going Nowhere Fast library. First, Riptor skips a trigger at almost the very start of the level by getting pushed up by a carrier. This means there are no flood until after the first door, except for a couple that are pre-spawned. He also added a cool grenade jump after picking up an overshield that lets you run to the end of the first floor pretty safe. Library also has 4 more doors that you're supposed to hold out at, but on 3 of them, Riptor had ways to hide and not fight any flood. Finally, instead of fighting all the flood at the end, Riptor instead grenade jumped through the last door before it's fully opened and ran to the end. Every one of these 4 times from Riptor, again, would stand as records for the rest of high-speed Halo's existence. All in all, Riptor alone cut 17 minutes off the Going Nowhere Fast times. Combined with Keys being brought from over 13 minutes down to less than 3, the 2-hour mark had been crushed. Assault in the Control Room had been beaten a few times since Going Nowhere Fast by Cody Miller and Insidious, but in July of 2007, Skirty got the earliest of these that still has video with the time of 5:53. It used a new bridge fall method that didn't involve having to ride a Pelican. With these runs, this meant that all of the Going Nowhere Fast times had been beaten. The community time for all levels added together was down to 1 hour, 36 minutes, and 30 seconds. In 2007, a runner named Lots of Luck appeared and set new easy world records on 343 Guilty Spark with a 5:40 time, and more importantly, a new MAW easy record of 8 814. This run had a new strategy for the reactor room. In Cody's 915 run on Legendary, he started on the right side of the reactor room and took out each one of the 4 reactors one at a time. In Lots of Luck's new easy run, he went left, did a grenade jump to get to the second level early instead of walking all the way around, and had a timing on opening the reactor so that he could do 2 at once on each side. This was huge, and a few months later, these strats were used for a new MA Legendary world record in 842 by, once again, Cody Miller, which also featured the cafe bump and Cody managing to get vision in single player. Unfortunately, the end of 2007 also brings us to the dark ages of CE speedrunning. From 2008 through 2012, High Speed Halo had a grand total of 6 new Halo CE records between Easy and Legendary. 6. 4 of these 6 were slight improvements to Easy world records on Assault on the Control Room, the Silent Cartographer, the Library, and 2 Betrayals respectively, and the other 2 were Skirty improving his Key's Legendary time, getting it down to 244 and then 241. High Speed Halo changed hands a couple times, and part of the lack of updated records was simply because it wasn't updated all that often by those running it at the time, which was a frustration for some of the runners. But for CE especially, the reality was also that there just wasn't anyone really speedrunning it. I've only mentioned a few different runners, and that's because for a long time the entire Halo speedrunning community, not just CE, was only a handful of people, and over the years a lot of those people moved on and there wasn't really anyone coming to replace them. The worst moment for CE speedrunning and Halo speedrunning generally came in 2011 at GDQ, which is Games Done Quick, a speedrunning event hosted for charity. Cody Miller was invited to speedrun 3 games, one of which was Halo CE on Legendary. The community time for all the levels was still a few minutes over an hour and a half at this point, so Cody gave GDQ a conservative full game time estimate of 2 hours. Unfortunately for Cody, this was not even close to how much time he needed.
Yeah, let me see what happens.
I forgot how to do this part.
Cody's GDQ run took well over 4 hours. Making matters worse, he had to lower the difficulty twice and finish the last 4 levels on normal. Cody not only couldn't handle the combat, but also couldn't do any of the tricks outside of Silent Cartographer, which still took him over 7 minutes. The history leading up to this run gives important context because, as mentioned, Halo wasn't really done full game. People did individual levels. So it's understandable that he wouldn't be flying through some of the levels that he didn't know as well, but also it's 100% on him for not practicing at all prior to doing a live full game run. You would expect him to be good at the level that he was the world record holder for, the MA, but it took him over 15 minutes on normal. I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag now. Even after the GDQ run, this wasn't known for a few more years, but Cody Miller cheated his previous world record runs. So on the MA, how did he do the cafe platforming in single player? My best guess watching the run, he does cafe bump, stands in the cafe, makes a cut, waits a long time for a checkpoint, and then falls in bounds. He reverts to that checkpoint, cuts back to himself now having vision while out of bounds, and can platform to skip part of the level. You can actually find the cut by watching his radar closely. Or for the 915 run, you can go to his archive.org upload and read the description that he edited in 2022, admitting that it's 2 segments and not a straight through run.
I don't know how it works, but it happens like 1 out of every 50 times where if you're like crouching, you must like get inside this room and then it loads those graphics.
You're a liar!
Even on his original Truth and Reconciliation run from Going Nowhere Fast, you can notice a cut when he enters the ship. So Cody was not as good as he claimed to have been, and on top of that, he didn't practice prior to GDQ, and it led to a train wreck and Halo speedrunning's reputation taking a hit. For more on this, I made an entire video breaking down this run in its entirety and all the stuff Cody messes up. On the bright side, in 2011, there was a new segmented full game CE Legendary speedrun from Slinky and Skirty. This run being segmented meant that there were edits and they could try different sections as many times as they needed, use tougher strategies and tricks that they may not want to do in a single segment run, and edit together what an ideal run of the game could look like. Some of these new tricks were cryo bump on Pillar Bottom, where you stand in the cryo tube at the start of the level, get bumped out of bounds, and can skip part of the beginning. This was another trick that was known about all the way back in 2001 or 2002, but hadn't been used in a run before. Pillar Bottom also featured a new trick called Maintenance Skip, where if you kill these 3 grunts fast and get a checkpoint at a certain time, you can get Cortana dialogue out of order, revert to that checkpoint, and get this maintenance door you're supposed to wait at to open several seconds faster. On Halo, instead of jumping on their Warthog to get up and activate the light bridge early, they do a Warthog fling. This is the same mechanic as on Silent Cartographer to get through the door, except here you're doing it into a wall and getting launched up. Truth and Reconciliation featured a grenade jump using 4 grenades to get all the way from the bottom floor to the 3rd floor in 1 jump rather than 3. Silent Cartographer, rather than doing the standard Warthog fling, instead did a trick called Window Bump. They exited the Warthog, were pushed through the window, and landed on an overshield to avoid dying from fall damage. Assault in the Control Room was pretty much the same as the IO world record, with the addition of a couple grenade jumps in the second half of the level to run through it faster. 343 Guilty Spark added a grenade jump towards the end of the facility, so rather than jump on a box in the previous room and then cross a bridge, Slinky did a grenade jump and could go straight to the elevator to leave. Because he didn't go the normal path and activate the light bridge, there were no enemies. The library had a different grenade jump towards the start and was riskier overall, but otherwise didn't really add anything new worth mentioning. Tuba Trails was the first level run by Skirty instead of Slinky, and it starts off with a bang. In the second room, instead of hanging back, Skirty takes out a Sentinel, then an Elite, and runs through everything. Then once outside, Skirty goes straight for the Banshee. And that sums up a lot of Skirty's Tuba Trails. It's mostly just YOLOing each section as fast as he could. At the broken door, rather than ramming the Ghost through with the Banshee like previous runs, Skirty uses a rocket launcher and invents what would become known as a 100% strat. In the words of GoRope,
that's called the 100% strat. It gets its name from how often it works.
On Keys, Skirty did the platforming running forward instead of going backwards. On the Moss, Skirty did Cafe Bump and showed himself falling back and bouncing at Vision because he's not a cheater. There was an extra grenade jump in the reactor room, and at the end of the Warthog run, he did a trick called Barrels to drive the Warthog straight through where you're supposed to get out at. The segmented run wasn't perfect. Some of the strats like Cryo Bump and Pillar of Autumn actually lost time. And on that note, Slinky would later be ousted as another cheater, which he also admitted to, and a lot of the tricks he came up with looked cool but would either be completely impractical or just plain slower, but I digress. The segmented run still showed off a lot that could be incorporated and built on for future runs, and showed that Halo CE still had a lot of room for improvement, even without finding new tricks. With high-speed Halo in disarray and not a lot of runners playing Halo anyway, those who were still active decided to move off of high-speed Halo and just keep track of records in a Google Sheet and keep their discussions in a Skype group. High-speed Halo would go on for a couple more years and still technically exist today and host AI-generated articles like Top 5 Most Sexy Halo Cortana Picture, but this was effectively the end of it. The biggest Halo speedrunner during this time was Mr. Monopoly, who had dominated Halo 2 for years and in 2013 started streaming on Twitch. Technology at this point had caught up, and runners, including Monopoly, started doing full game runs and keeping track of full game records. After Cody Miller's terrible 2011 run at GDQ and a run he did the following year at GDQ for Halo Reach that also went poorly, GDQ was hesitant to host any more Halo runs. But Monopoly and his fans and other Halo runners successfully got Halo 2 to be listed as a donation incentive, which was crushed, and Monopoly was invited to GDQ to run on January 7th, 2014. Monopoly's run was amazing, and even though I don't run Halo 2, it's one of my favorite runs ever to watch. A Halo speedrun had just been done in front of by far the biggest audience it ever had, and it was a huge success. Shortly thereafter, GoRope and a few others decided to start a new site for Halo speedrunning, HaloRuns.com. This is the site Halo runners still use today. Halo Runs was different than high-speed Halo in a few ways. First off, it just looks better, especially with how records were kept, which was now front and center on the site. As well, Halo Runs would also keep track of full game times and was updated regularly. Maybe the biggest change was that it no longer tracked normal or heroic runs. Easy and legendary were the most popular categories, and they felt it was better not to divide things too much, especially given how dead Halo speedrunning had been in the years prior. Since its creation, HaloRuns.com has done a much better job keeping track of times and records than high-speed Halo ever did, and because of that, we're going to be able to get a lot more detailed from here on out. Speaking of, why don't we update what the best CE legendary times were when Halo Run started? Pillar of Autumn's world record was 4:58, under 5 minutes, by a runner named Khan. The first big change from Riptor's old record was this section after the maintenance tunnel where Khan sticks an elite, throws another plasma at the ground, and then runs through. The second big change was the ending, where instead of killing the enemies, Khan runs to another maintenance tunnel to get around them. Halo, the levels world record, was 12:45 by a runner named Subwhistle. Sub's run didn't really add anything new that hadn't been seen in Riptor's run, it was just that run, but better. Riptor's Truth and Reconciliation had been beaten in 2013 by Subwhistle as well with a time of 15:10, which in turn was beaten by Khan with a time of 14:54 in early 2014, right when Halo Runs was started. Khan's run doesn't have video, but based on Sub's run, my guess is, again, it's Riptor's run, but faster. Insidious's Silent Cartographer from 2005 still had been beaten at the time of Halo Run's creation, but on February 19th of 2014, a couple weeks in, a runner named LaFock beat it with a time of 3:49. Same thing on Assault in the Control Room. Skirty's 5:53 run from 2007 was still the record, but on February 18th, 2014, LaFock beat it with the 5:44. 343 Guilty Spark was crushed by Subwhistle in 2013 with the 6:37. Subwhistle started doing the final grenade jump from the segmented run in his runs, the only difference being he used a frag instead of a plasma. Halo runners still do this grenade jump now, and it's called Subnade, named after Subwhistle. Riptor's 14:25 library still stood when Halo Runs was created, but was quickly beaten by Khan with the 14:17. Insidious's 2 Betrayals was still record as well, and his record would stay that way all the way until March 7th of 2014 when Khan got a 16:56. Khan's 2 Betrayals, which uses a lot of strats that were developed by a runner named Joshington, is ridiculous. There isn't really anything in terms of tricks, it's more so the combat and how he navigates each of these rooms. But Classic TB, as it's called, was the hardest level in CE speedrunning, and this run really is the origin of it. Most of what he does in this 2 Betrayals run is still the classic route today. Keyword being classic because we certainly aren't done talking about 2 Betrayals yet. For a while after Halo Runs was created, Skirty's 241 Keys was still the record. More on it later. The Moz record was still Cody's cheated 8:42 run until March 11th, 2014 when Khan beat it with an 8:22. Impressively, Khan got this record without even doing Cafe Bump. Finally, the full game record at the time of Halo Run's launch was 147.28 by GoatRope. At this point, IL strats and full game strats were basically the same, so full game runs were just the ILs ran back to back to back. A lot of the IL records at the time were just taken from full game runs. GoatRope's run was the world record, but it was still far from perfect. There were plenty of deaths and mistakes throughout, which isn't to say that it wasn't a great run, because it was, but there was still a lot of room for improvement even without finding any new tricks or strats. 2014 ended up being maybe the most important year in Halo speedrunning history. A few months after Monopoly's GDQ run, which sparked things again, GoatRope was invited to do a CE run at GDQ, which also went really well and is still my favorite Halo run of all time. And with Halo runs now being a thing, GoatRope plugged the new site several times. And of course, in the fall of 2014, the Master Chief Collection was released, which came with achievements for beating each level under a certain amount of time and achievements for beating each game on Legendary under 3 hours. A runner named Naked Eli got famous on YouTube for making speedrun walkthroughs of every level in the MCC and single-handedly got a lot of people interested in learning Halo speedrunning. In 1 year, Halo speedrunning went from being on its last leg to bigger than ever. And with all these new people entering, that meant there were more people looking over levels and coming up with new strategies. With new discoveries happening left and right, there was more movement and records throughout 2014 than there had been in the near decade of Halo running prior, especially for Legendary. Pillar of Autumn went through a huge shift in 2014. In older runs, the strats were overall pretty safe, but as the year went by, riskier and riskier strats were picked up, like here. In older runs, runners would walk around and grenade enemies, but the new route was to jump through this barrier, which skips a spawn trigger, and run straight through. There was also this hallway that runners would clear that they began running through after throwing a couple grenades in precise spots. LaFoc also used the maintenance skip previously seen in the segmented run in one of his world record runs. By the end of 2014, the legendary world record for Pillar of Autumn was 408 by Subwhistle. Halo was mostly the same, the only change was that in the rubble, instead of sniping the Marines on top of the big rock, runners started driving up, running over one of them, and picking up the other two to help them clear the last area. One of these two Marines would have a sniper rifle and would ride in the passenger seat. You'd want him to be the passenger because he does crazy amounts of damage. By the end of 2014, Subwhistle had brought Halo's world record all the way down to 1117. Truth and Reconciliation had the biggest drop of any level, going from 1454 in early 2014 to 1040 by the end of 2014, and another run from Subwhistle. One change over time was how the opening was handled. In Cody's original TNR run from Going Nowhere Fast, he sat back and killed just about everyone at the opening of the level. Unfortunately, again, Riptor's old run isn't available anymore, but by 2013, runners started sniping 2 elites, 2 jackals, and then booking it, which is also shown in Sub's 1040. There's also a pathing change where instead of walking around this, Sub cleared a few enemies, then walked up a rock and went straight through it. After doing a wave fight at the start of the ship, runners would grab camo and make their way to the second hangar, affectionately called the RNG room. RNG is basically just a speedrunning term for luck. There's a set of doors on the left you have to go through, but only the Covenant can open them. In Cody's old run, he spent a lot of time clearing this room, but by 2014, runners had started baiting the Covenant, usually elites, but sometimes not, into opening one of the doors for them. In older runs of TNR as well, runners would grab a hidden camo before clearing the holding cells of the ship. In 2014 is when they stopped doing this. Silent Cartographer was a very interesting level in 2014. LaFox 349 was beaten by 1 second by a runner named Vetroxity or Vetro. Vetro did the same strats with the Warthog fling and running upstairs. A month after Vetro's run, Khan tied it with the 348 himself, except to use a totally different route. Instead of the Warthog fling, Khan went with the window bump shown in the segmented run.
Oh yeah.
Subwhistle would later beat these times with a 343, but Vetro closed out the year with a 339 world record that also used the window bump. Assault in the Control Room, on the other hand, showed basically no more developments. Vetro took the world record in June and lowered it a couple times to close the year out with the 538, but the route didn't change at all. Vetro did have an MCC achievement named after him for this, Vetro Strike, which oddly is a par score achievement and not the par time achievement, but still. 343 Guilty Spark had a major change, not so much in the route besides the addition of Subnade, but the ending of the level, which was a mystery for years, was finally figured out. At the end of 343 Guilty Spark, you arrive at this structure and have to hold out. For a long time, what exactly had to happen for the level to end was unknown and seemed to be random. Sometimes it would end fast, other times slow, until it was finally discovered in 2014 that on Legendary, the end trigger was tied to your ally Sentinels dying. Once they died, a 7-second timer would start and then the level would end. Knowing this, runners started shooting the Sentinels themselves to get them to die faster. On Easy, this end timer also triggers simply by entering the last area with 1 red health. Subwhistle closed out 2014 with a legendary record of 544. Now we're on to library, and it's time to take a second to talk about a runner named Joshington. Joshington was going bananas in 2014 with discoveries. The barrier jump in Pillar of Autumn, that was Joshington. On Halo, he came up with a way to run into the first grenade jump rather than stopping and waiting. On TNR, he discovered a grenade jump to get you from the bottom floor to the top floor that involves sticking yourself with a plasma grenade. On Tuba Trails, he found a faster version of a previously done grenade jump, but his most impressive and important work was on the library, keys, and the maw. Joshington developed a trick called flood bumping. If you played Halo, you know that some flood fall down like they're dead and then after a few seconds get back up. Whenever they get back up, they don't gradually come up, their hitbox instantly reappears where they first fell. So if you stand on top of one of these reviver flood while they're down, when they get back up, you'll get bumped and can get pushed into or through walls, doors, etc. The library has a lot of doors that you're supposed to wait at. A couple of these you can grenade jump through, but the rest Josh found ways to skip by flood bumping. These doors are the first door, which is 100% consistent, dark door where the flood that spawns has a 40% chance of spawning as a reviver, the 92nd door where you have to hope for a human reviver to spawn, and last door where you also have to hope for a human reviver to spawn. The first door on the second floor also has a flood bump, but we'll get back to that in a bit. He showed these flood bumps off in a run that was world record at the time and groundbreaking, but 2014 did end with Skirty having the legendary world record at 12:33. Awesome. With Tuba Trails, outside of what Khan showed off in the early part of 2014 and Josh's improved grenade jump, the biggest thing was a new deload at the very start. If you press the button to open the door to exit the control room twice at specific times, you can get the door to open while the game still thinks you're inside, so no enemies will spawn except 2 jackals and 2 elites that are pre-spawned. After getting in a Banshee, you do have to fly back up and hit the button again though. The world record at the end of 2014 was 14:11 from Subwhistle, and the part-time achievement for Tuba Trails on MCC was named Whistle Stop Tour after him. On keys, flood bumping was first done on a run by a runner named Soul. At the very start of the mission, there's a flood with no arms chasing a grunt. Soul took down this flood in front of a door and was bumped through to get straight to the keys room. Later in 2014, a faster spot was found though, so instead of getting bumped by the door, runners would take the flood back to where they spawn and bump through a wall. This doesn't take you straight to the keys room, but the issue is that even if you do get bumped in the keys room, you have to walk back here to hit a trigger anyway. So this is faster, and Skirty once again held the legendary record at the end of 2014 with a 2:23. The only issue with this trick was that the flood would always spawn, but he wasn't always a reviver, and it wasn't known how to consistently get him to be a reviver. So in 2014, this trick wasn't full game viable yet. Lastly, the maw. What Cody Miller had claimed to do with Cafe Bump wasn't reproducible by anyone else until 2014 when Joshington found a way to get vision in the cafe without falling in bounds or cheating. After doing Cafe Bump, there is very precise platforming and positioning, and once in position, you nudge yourself so that you were out of bounds, but your camera was just barely in bounds to load everything. Josh himself held the world record for maw at the end of 2014 with a time of 7:55. With all these new strats, tricks, and discoveries, the full game legendary record in 2014 was cut by a lot. First by Khan with a 1:44.45, but it didn't take long for GoRup to beat that time, and then beat it again, and again, and again, bringing the record down to 1:36.40 on June 28th, 2014. A month later, on July 30th, Subwhistle claimed the full game record for the first time with a 1:36.22, and the record went back and forth between Sub, GoRope, and Vetro, who also held it for a brief period of time. In November 2014, the CE runners were approaching the 90-minute full game mark when just 10 years earlier, it was a project to get the individual level world records under 2 hours. On November 17th, 2014, Subwhistle was streaming legendary runs on Twitch when he started a run that didn't seem like it was going to be anything.
That was slow. This is a really bad run, but I don't even care.
Especially after losing a minute on AOTCR due to bridge fall problems.
This run is pretty much over.
But after having a better Guilty Spark in library, Sub salvaged the run with a gold Tuba Trails and ended the run with a gold maw.
Yes, 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 yes! Oh my yes!
The 90-minute barrier had been broken. Also, not to neglect easy, but at the end of 2014, the full game easy record had been cut all the way down to 1:16.46 by Vetro, with earlier records also being set by Khan, GoRope, and LaFoc. Between an explosion in popularity, the birth of Halo runs, tons of new discoveries, and the breaking of the 1:30 barrier for legendary full game, 2014 was a pretty good year for CE speedrunning. 2015 would see the introduction of the greatest CE speedrunner of all time. To start 2015, on February 21st, Halo Runs released a new segmented run done by Subwhistle, Skirty, Soul, and Vitroxity. This run featured new tricks like drop skip on Halo. The way it works is the first area has 6 Marines you're supposed to save and wait for Foe Hammer to come and drop off a Warthog. After clearing the first ship upon arriving, you'll get some Marine dialogue, and then 5 more ships will come in, the first 3 having Marine dialogue before them. It was discovered that if 5 of the 6 Marines were dead, you'd skip the dialogue before each ship, and if you cleared them fast enough, you could skip one of the ships entirely and only fight 4. On Silent Cartographer, Vetro did the window bump, but rather than stop his fall using the overshield, he bounced off a space crate, then used the overshield in a nade stack that sent him up a floor. Normally on Assault in the Control Room, you just drive the Ghost most of the way until you fly up to a set of bridges, but in the segmented run, they showed a trick called Fireworks. By throwing a frag grenade at the same moment a plasma grenade explodes at your feet, you can actually launch your frag grenade onto a platform, and on that platform there's a Banshee you can now jump in. The library was full of flood bumps, but one that hadn't been used in a run before was at the first door on the second floor. You can easily just stand to the side and no flood will spawn, but instead Skirty launches a carrier into the corner, stands on its legs, and gets bumped through the door and teleported even further. This trick is called Carrier Bump, and it's the worst trick ever conceived. The reason being that it only has a 1 in 7 chance of working. Attempting this trick in an IL, let alone full game, would be painful. Two Betrayals didn't have anything that unusual, but GoRope did mention a theoretical strat.
There's actually a cool strategy that ended up being slower in this segment, where you can actually get a Banshee out of the map and just fly straight to the end, but it ended up breaking triggers. And if you you could go back and hit the triggers, but it still ended up being too slow, so it didn't get used.
A Banshee outside of the map? Interesting. The Maw was hands down the craziest level. Rather than doing cafe bump, Skirty does an even earlier bump out of bounds when Flood bash open a set of doors. The issue was that you couldn't see anything, but that didn't stop Skirty. Usually after cafe bump, you'd platform through the cafe, then fall back in bounds after, then walk through the cryo room and so on, but Skirty platformed without having vision farther than anyone had ever platformed before, skipping the entire cryo room. One thing I'll mention is that with the release of the Master Chief Collection, Xbox players had a sizable advantage with the Maw out-of-bounds platforming. MCC players could do this bump and have vision just by switching to anniversary graphics. So the Maw in 2015 was dominated by an MCC runner named Dark Raider. Make no mistake though, this platforming even with vision is really tough, and Dark Raider was really good at it. Back to the segmented run, the Maw had maybe the dumbest thing I've ever seen before.
So the aim of this floor is to get to the top level as fast as possible. On that.
Wild stuff. The segmented run finished with a time of 107.04, almost 10 minutes faster than the old segmented run from 2011. CE speedrunning had come a long ways and not that much time, but now I'll give you a date in 2015 even earlier than this. February 16th, 2015. That was the day that Garish Goblin set his first ever CE world record, an IL of 2 Betrayals on Legendary. It was a 13:31, 40 seconds faster than Subwhistle's previous record. At different points throughout 2015, Garish held world records for 7 out of the 10 levels. The exceptions were Library, Keys, and the Maw. For the Library and Keys, you'd have to grind ILs to get record. Library, because the flood bumps are inconsistent, and to get a perfect run, you'd have to play it over and over. And Keys, at this point, still didn't have a consistent method for its flood bump. Of the 7 levels that Garish held the record for throughout the year, 5 of them were still his to close out 2015. Pillar of Autumn at 404, Truth and Reconciliation at 942, The Silent Cartographer at 321, 343 Guilty Spark with a 528, and 2 Betrayals with a 1242. Garish's Silent Cartographer run used a similar nade stack as Atrocities in the segmented run, except this new grenade stack ended with a self stick, and with this had enough to get you all the way from the bottom floor to the top. This is a really early version of a trick called stick stack. But most impressive was what Garish did with full game. Skirty beat Subwhistle's sub 90 minute time with a 129.51 on April 15th, 2015. On May 31st, Garish beat this time and claimed the world record with a 129.25. Unlike his IL times that would change hands, Garish never gave up the full game record. There were 6 more full game legendary records set in 2015. All 6 were Garish, who closed out 2015 with a 124.47. His Halo featured drop skip as seen in the segmented run and was actually a world record itself at a 10:41 IL time. Subwhistle would beat it by 1 second a few days later, and again a couple weeks later with a 10:38, which was still the record at the end of 2015. He lost a bit of time on Truth and Reconciliation, but with an 11:15 on a level that was over 16 minutes for years, great stuff. Especially considering at this point there still wasn't really anything new for TNR. It was the same level, just done a lot better. The next 4 levels, SC, AOTCR, Guilty Spark, and the Library, all went poorly, culminating in Garish being over 26 seconds behind his previous best run. But the level that he had titled the Killer of Urns ended up being his savior, and he saved over a minute with a new goal to get him to minus 40. If that wasn't good enough, then he followed it up with another gold on Keys, and a really great mod to bring him to 124.47. Of the 5 levels that Garish didn't have the legendary world record on at the end of 2015, Halo, as previously mentioned, was Subwhistles with a 10:38, Assault in the Control Room's record was held by a new runner named Cold Grunner, who had a 5:28, the Library was held by Skirty with an 11:59, Keys was also Skirty's with a 2:21, and the Maw's record was 7:25 by Dark Raider. 2014 and 2015 were the biggest 2 years for Halo CE records ever in terms of quantity, which makes sense. It was a game that not a lot of people were running for a really long time, and there was tons of room for improvement on every level on both easy and legendary. Going forward, there aren't going to be as many records discussed, but that doesn't mean the run stopped developing. We still have another 21.5 minutes to cut out a full game before we get to the current world record. In 2016, there were 24 legendary solo records set between individual levels in full game. 18 of these 24 were set by Garish Goblin. Outside of records in 2016, there was one of the coolest finds in CE speedrunning history. On Assault in the Control Room, for years, the trick was bridge fall. However, when playing on Legendary, there was always a pesky Banshee that would chase you during bridge fall. Unlike later Halo games, Halo C didn't have vehicle hijacking, so if the Banshee wanted to come run you over, there was nothing you could do about it. But in April of 2016, a player named Sligfantry discovered that you could actually get the Banshee pilot ejected and then fly it yourself. Sligfantry refined this further a few days later and invented a Banshee grab method called Rim Grab. Cold Grunner pulled it off in a run on April 15th, 2016 and set a new world record at 450. This was the first single segment run that used Banshee grab in any form. A couple months later, another runner named Rockslider developed a new, highly consistent method of doing Banshee grab. It involves standing in a spot, crouching at the right time, walking into the doorway you came out of, and watching the elite get ejected from his Banshee. If you watch modern CE speedruns, then you'll know that this is still the method we use for Banshee grab today. Banshee grab is only possible on Heroic and Legendary because the Banshee doesn't spawn on Easy or Normal. So Easy runs still use the bridge fall, and this is one way that Legendary actually saves time against Easy. Subwhistle came up with the new strat that was used by a runner named Savasuka in a Silent Cartographer world record. After doing stick stack, there was still one more level you had to walk up. A new grenade jump called Triple Nade was discovered that would let you go straight to where you originally fell off of after the Warthog Fling. This jump can only be done on Legendary because you actually have less health on lower difficulties, and even with full overshields and health, you'll blow yourself up. Savasuka's new record that used this trick was a 320. Of the other new records at the end of the year, Halo was brought down to 1024 by Garish, Truth and Reconciliation to 853, sub 9 minutes by Garish, AOTCR to 442 by Cold Grunner, 343 Guilty Spark to 527 by Soul, Library to 1113 by Dark Raider, and 2 Betrayals to 1213 by Garish. The most impressive and important thing was what Garish was doing in full game. Full game still wasn't doing stick stack on SC or the flood bump on keys, and outside of drop skip on Halo and Banshee grab on AOTCR, the route really hadn't changed that much since the end of 2014. And still, on December 23rd, 2016, Garish Goblin set a new full game record of 119.40. He broke the 80-minute barrier, and we are not even close to being done with finding new tricks. By the end of 2016, the full game record, which we had seen in 2014 change hands quite a bit, still had not been set by anyone other than Garish since he got the record in 2015. Garish was dominating Halo CE. And 3 years after Go Rope's GDQ run, Garish was invited to run CE Legendary at the summer 2017 GDQ event. And again, in terms of tricks, the run wasn't that much further ahead of where it was during Go Rope's run. The main additions were flood bumping on Library, Banshee grab, and now Garish was also doing stick stack and the triple nade jump on Silent Cartographer. There was also a new trick at the Broken Door on 2 Betrayals developed by a runner named G-Pro to fly your Banshee through instead of having to get a ghost. But most of the time Garish was cutting and where he was light years ahead of old runs was in combat. Garish was really good at CE's combat. And when he finished his GDQ run with a time of 124.51, nearly 27 minutes faster than Goat Rope's GDQ run, that's where he saved the most time. There weren't 27 new minutes of tricks he was doing. On December 31st of 2017, Garish set a new world record of 114.45. This included a brand new trick on 343 Guilty Spark, which to this point had been unchanged for years, called Reveal Skip. After entering the structure in the swamp, in the first room after the elevator, you were able to use a light with weird geometry on one of the walls to get out of bounds and into a room you aren't supposed to be able to access until after the flood reveal. By doing this, you're able to get to the second elevator a few minutes early. And spoiler alert, shortly into 2018, a much better setup for this was developed on the other side of the wall that's both easier and faster, and it's the method we use in runs today. On a much smaller note, in late 2017, Garish stopped using the strat on Halo to drive into the rocks to pick up Marines, and instead went back to the old strat of sniping them. Garish's run also included the Keys flood bump rather than the shield bump, which had been made full game viable by a runner named Svo, who found a consistent way to get a reviver to spawn by using precise inputs from the first frame of the level to its spawn. Also in 2017, this didn't make its way into any runs, but it was found by Savasuka that you could use the Wraith in the belly of the Truth and Reconciliation to get pushed out of bounds by walking into it, destroying it, clipping into it, and getting launched up. Normally after entering the Covenant ship, you do a wave fight, which on Legendary had 10 waves. In August of 2017, G-Pro uploaded a video showing himself slowly platforming all the way from the initial out of bounds bump past the belly area and past the RNG room. This had the potential to turn into a big time save, but the issue was that actually clipping into the Wraith and getting bumped out of bounds was not consistent at all. It needed more development and didn't get anywhere beyond this in 2017, but was being worked on by G-Pro, Savasuka, Joshington, and another runner named Nibre. So 2017 wasn't that big of a year for new tricks, but in 2018, the pendulum started swinging the other direction with the joining of a new member and discovery of some of the craziest tricks in CE speedrunning. 2018 started off normal enough. Subwhistle got the first ever sub 4 minute pillar of autumn with a 359, time was shaved off of a couple other levels, and the leaderboards were still mostly being dominated by Garish Goblin. The first curveball came in July of 2018. A few years earlier, Sligfantry, who also found the first Banshee grab method found a way to fly a Banshee outside of the map on 2 betrayals, most importantly on solo. This had been known about in co-op, and Skirty has an even older video showing it on co-op. It wasn't really practical though, because like all out-of-bounds tricks, you can't see any part of the level outside of where you've already been, so the screen is just empty. On the MCC side of things, because you can get vision by switching to anniversary graphics, Kneebrave was working on making a viable route for Bool, Banshee out of level, but it was really difficult and not faster than the classic speedrun. However, part of the method for Bool that Sleepentry found involved flying a different Banshee into the ceiling to get yourself out of bounds on top of the map. Savasuka took this part of the trick and applied it on AOTCR. Typically, after flying up to the bridges, you'd walk through the rooms until the natural ice bridge where you'd fly to the control room. Instead, Savasuka flew their Banshee into the room to the far side, flew up into the ceiling, went out of bounds, and came back inbounds on the next room before the ice bridge, skipping walking through a long hallway. On July 9th, 2018, Savasuka set a new easy record using this trick with a 518. At some point, Joshington was attempting this trick with an invincibility cheat turned on. After messing up and getting stuck under the Banshee, Josh tried to wiggle his way out but was teleported to the room he was supposed to go to. And thus, Banshee teleports were found. This was turned into an actual trick, and on July 17th, Garish set a new AOTCR legendary world record of 430 that used a Banshee teleport. But it wasn't over yet. In October of 2018, 11 new Assault on the Control Room records were set, 8 on Legendary and 3 on Easy. A runner named Burnt found a new consistent teleport method from a slightly different spot with slightly different melees that would send you slightly further. But Burnt wasn't done yet. When you get to the pyramid at the end of the level, there's a series of doors you have to open and go through, but the issue is that they take a while to open. A week after his first Banshee teleport setup, Burnt found a new setup to skip the first 3 doors of the control room and take you to the last room, saving even more time. Over the next few days, Burnt and G-Pro worked on a new way of doing the first Banshee teleport that would go even farther. What they worked out was a new setup right next to the door you enter rather than flying to the far side of the room. You'd stand under the Banshee, melee it in a couple precise spots, walk back towards it from the left, and wind up just inside the door before the ice bridge. There was also a new setup for the second teleport from farther away that gets the player closer to the door switch. But what else was found in 2018? There was a new reveal skip method we already mentioned. The stick stack lineup on Silent Cartographer was changed to be what it is now. Skirty cut his keys time by a couple more seconds with a new flood bump. Actually, hang on, let's go back to Silent Cartographer for a second. In full game runs, you would do stick stack followed by triple nay to get back where you first fell off from. But on December 7th, 2018, Savasuka uploaded a video showing a new grenade jump called Shafted Stack. And later that same day, uploaded an easy record at 2:59, the first sub 3-minute run, that used it. What is Shafted Stack? Well, it's stick stack, except you go all the way to the top of the shaft. Simple enough. The legendary record for Silent Cartographer changed hands a couple times, going from Cordiaxis to a new runner named Kronos to Garish Goblin. Garish, though, used a different trick called Hog Stack. Garish did his Warthog fling a particular way to get his Warthog in a specific spot. On his grenade stack, he gets extra height to where he goes next to the window where he did the fling, from which he can enter the passenger seat of the Warthog through the glass, and then run upstairs. Garish's record was the first sub 3-minute legendary Silent Cartographer at 2:59 as well. During 2018, Joshington found a new method for the Wraith Bump, and G-Pro worked more on the platforming. In July, Savasuka pulled off the first TNR IL to use any form of belly skip and easy run in 6:11. It doesn't go as far as G-Pro demoed. Savasuka drops in bounds before the RNG room, but this was still a big step forward. On the easy side of things, Garish was the new full game record holder, and on August 20th, 2018, he got the first sub 110 run with a 109.15. And with his legendary time being 112.45, the potential was there to get it below sub 110 as well. Both of these runs were also using the full belly skip with platforming all the way past the RNG room, so just a month after Savasuka did a shorter version in an IL, Garish had adopted the trick and the whole path into full game. The run was starting to take shape and wasn't that far off from where it is now, and 2019 saw it get even closer. I mentioned with the Banshee teleports a runner named Burnt. Banshee teleports weren't the only thing Burnt was working on. Whether it was another carrier bump on Library, another Wraith teleport on TNR the Hangar, a teleport on the Maw to skip the cafe entirely, or a teleport to skip a door on the Library that on Legendary is closed for 90 seconds, Burnt was going nuts. When I first started speedrunning Halo, I was told that if there's a teleport, it was probably found by Burnt. Speaking of skipping the 90-second door on Library, the strat here was to do a flood bump, but like all flood bumps outside of first door, it wasn't perfectly consistent and you could get screwed by bad luck. A new method of skipping this door developed by Burnt, Joshington, and G-Pro called Light Bump involved getting pushed on top of the map by the set of doors on the far side of the room, doing a bit of platforming, looking at a precise spot, and then getting teleported to the next hallway with no enemies. This made its way into full game in 2019, showing up in Garish's runs. Another Library trick, Carrier Bump, as seen in the 2015 segmented run, made its way into a 110.45 legendary record by Garish. This trick, again, has a 1 in 7 chance of working, but Garish got its second try. However, due to the low chance of it actually working, Garish didn't keep on doing this trick, and this record run is the only one of his records to use it. But these two tricks meant the library, which had been neglected for years at this point, had room for a new record. Kronos pulled off the first sub-11 library with a 1056. This run was on Legendary. It included light bump as well as carrier bump for the first time in a library IL record. Another runner named Maxu would top this with a 1037 and later a 1036. Maxu also beat Garish's easy full game record with a 108.30 and later beat that time with a 108.23 and 108 even to close out 2019. The Maw had been dominated by MCC players due to their advantage with out-of-bounds platforming, but using his new Maw teleport, Burnt was able to get the legendary IL record for Maw with a 701. And for years on TNR, the grenade jump in the hangar had been the triple nade to the second floor, and 2 other jumps to get to the third floor. In June of 2019, the idea of finding a consistent grenade jump to get you straight from the bottom floor to the top was brought up again by Kronos, referencing an IL run by Khan that had done it in the past. A couple months later in October, Burnt found a consistent setup, and the jump we do now, called Quad Stack, was born. Subwhistle and Chrono started attempting it in full game easy runs, but the first time it was successfully pulled off in a record run was January 29th, 2020 by Garish in a 110.14, 15 seconds off of sub 110 for Legendary. This run also featured Burnt's Maw Cafe skip teleport. On the same day as Garish's 110.14, a new world record was submitted for 2 betrayals on Legendary, a 10.49 by a runner named Sorix, 5 seconds faster than the previous record which had been set by Burnt at the end of 2019. What was unique about Sorix's run was that he actually did bull and managed to do it fast. So you may be wondering why bull is so difficult. You get a Banshee out of bounds and you can just fly to the end, right? Unfortunately, no. It was known for years how to deload all the enemies across the entire map using the method with opening the door at the start. However, the skip's a trigger, and the way 2 betrayals works is you have to hit every trigger in order or else the level in trigger will not work. That's why runners who use the deload have to fly back up and hit the button again. So while flying out of bounds, there's a series of triggers you have to fly through, again, in order. These triggers are expecting you to be walking, so depending on when you enter them, you can actually go through too fast and miss one without knowing it. And because you have to hit them in order, if you miss one, none of the rest will work after that. So you have to backtrack without even knowing which one you missed, and your run's dead. On top of this, the trigger that the level in trigger is relying upon is what's called the 5 flood trigger. In this area where you're supposed to be on foot, 5 flood have to die in order for you to progress. This means the level has to be loaded. You can't simply fly through the trigger like the rest. So on top of hitting the earlier triggers out of bounds, afterwards you have to load these areas while keeping your Banshee out of the level. Sorix's run had him hit all the triggers until you get outside and are supposed to grab a ghost. Then he turns around and loads the first and second section of the level before coming back in bounds at the bridges. From here, he's able to fly to the second pulse generator, clear it, and do the rest of the 2 betrayals like the classic run. The route would continue to be developed though, and Sorix's time was cut to 10:10 by Cordiaxis and a couple months later to 9:50 by Savasuka. By this point, it had been learned that you can actually trigger the second phase pulse generator in the Banshee, so instead of clearing it on foot, they'd fly through it and then start loading in the map and coming back in bounds after. Speaking of Savasuka, they were a PC player, but on March 3rd of 2020, Halo C Anniversary was made available through the Master Chief Collection on PC. This meant that the anniversary strats that had been Xbox only were now available to PC players, and with this, plus 2020 quarantines, a new influx of PC players came in. The Maw world records were destroyed. Burnt's Cafe skip teleport was being used, and with anniversary graphics, runners could also do the platforming that previously only Xbox players could do. A runner named Scale started running Maw on Easy and Legendary, holding both world records until another runner named Sloth SG took the Legendary record himself, his first CE world record. Sloth and Scales went back and forth on Maw Legendary, but 2020 ended with Sloth holding the Legendary record with a 643. The Easy record was held by Scales with the 631. In August of 2020, a runner named Cambid took his first CE world record with an 852 on 2 Betrayals Legendary. Then a couple weeks later, he beat it again, and again, and again. By the end of 2020, Cambid had taken the Legendary time all the way down to 717 and 712 on Easy. The new Bull route was faster and went further, with Cambid not coming back in bounds until after the Broken Door, meaning the Broken Door skip with flying the Banshee through it wasn't necessary anymore. Halo MCC also made belly skip easier with anniversary graphics because instead of having to face the belly room and do everything backwards, anniversary graphics allowed you to see where you were going. Burnt also broke new ground on Assault in the control room. The fireworks strat to get an early Banshee after doing bridge fall, shown in the 2015 segmented run, had never been done in an IL until Burnt did it on a new Easy world record of 431. 2020 also saw a new runner named Wood Carpet knock the Library Legendary record to 1014 and the Easy record to 1016. On January 30th of 2020, on his last record on Halo PC, Garish Goblin cracked the 110 mark with a 109.55. But with the MCC switch just a couple months away, it wouldn't be too long before that time would get beaten. As a side note, Halo C on easy starts with a tutorial and has other time losses here and there, the biggest of which is not being able to do Banshee Grab on AOTCR. It had been speculated for years that maybe someday Legendary would be faster than easy. Through 2020, now in MCC, Garish cut his full game time more and more. On July 14th, Garish got a Legendary time of 107.28. The easy record at the time was 107.52 by Kronos. The threshold had been beaten, and Legendary was now faster than easy. And Garish kept cutting his time even further, culminating in a 106.15. This run would later be reacted to by former Bungie developers who worked on Halo in a video uploaded by IGN, which is one of my favorite YouTube videos ever.
Marty, he's killing the Marines.
In early 2021, Burnt and Scale started working on an out-of-bounds route to skip part of the Pillar of Autumn. In this hallway, after clearing it, instead of moving on, you do a shield bump like the old Key shield bump and go into the ceiling, from which you can platform and hop back and bounce in front of the maintenance door. This trick is called Stair Skip. It was made even cooler a couple days later after Burnt showed off a new out-of-bounds teleport that needs less platforming to get to and takes you to the end of the maintenance tunnel and prevents any enemies from spawning outside of it. The issue was that this trick seemed really hard, and like it was going to need a lot of work before it was anything other than maybe a segmented trick, and certainly wasn't going to be in full game anytime soon. Then a few days later, Kronos set a new Pillar of Autumn record using the Stair Skip teleport. Between Easy and Legendary, 22 new Pillar of Autumn records were set in 2021, and Stair Skip was adopted into full game. On September 28th, 2021, 6.5 years after his first Legendary full game record, Garish set his last Legendary full game record, which used Stair Skip and came in at a time of 105.41. At this point though, after years of being the Halo C Legendary runner, Garish was pretty tapped out of Halo speedrunning and started to get tired of grinding for better times, as explained in a YouTube video he'd uploaded a couple months earlier. There was still room for improvement on CE, but the run was optimized enough that without discovering any new tricks, it would take a lot of work to get there, and Garish wasn't really interested in doing it anymore. Someone else would have to step up, and people were. Outside of Legendary full game, the maw kept going back and forth between Sloth and Scales until a new runner named Nervy Destroyer swept Easy and Legendary, getting their times down to 6:22 and 6:32 respectively. Cambid started running Easy full game and managed to get Easy faster than Legendary again, bringing Easy down to 105.04. 2021 also included the latest edition of Halo CE done segmented, this time primarily by Burn and Cambid. The time per segmented was 46:07, and unlike the past ones, I can't even explain what things are done in it. I'll link it in the description if you're interested, cause you'll have to see it for yourself. It's just complete madness. On March 1st of 2022, Cambid completed Halo CE on Legendary in 105.21. For the first time in nearly 7 years, the full game Legendary record was held by someone other than Garish Goblin. And if that wasn't enough, 3 days later, Cambid set another record with a 105.06. A lot more work would be done on Legendary ILs in 2022, with Pillar of Autumn being dropped to a 3:22 by Cambid. Sloth took Halo under 10 minutes with a 9:57. Truth and Reconciliation to 6:09 by Cambid. Silent Cartographer to 2:53 by Cambid. Assault in the Control Room to 3:29 by Nervy Destroyer with a new Banshee at a level strat. And Library to sub 10 on both Legendary and Easy with a 9:45 and 9:55, both by Wood Carpet. Two Betrayals was taken to sub 7 by Nervy Destroyer, Cambid, and a runner named Helpless, ending the year at 6:54 on Easy by Nervy and 6:59 on Legendary by Cambid. In full game, Nervy Destroyer rose as the new Easy record holder, not only beating Cambid's previous record and making it to 104, but cutting it all the way down to 103 with a 103.51. On June 27th, Cambid cracked the 104 barrier on Legendary with a 104.53. This run included a first try carrier bump. If that wasn't enough, later on June 27th, Cambid set the world record again, this time with a 104.25 run that did not even attempt carrier bump. That meant Cambid potentially had 40 seconds of time save still, just on carrier bump. And on February 6, 2023, Cambid pulled off a run with first try carrier bump, first try dark door, and first try at last door. Even with an unfortunate death on two Betrayals where he killed himself, this run was insane and came in at 103.49, making Legendary once again faster than Easy. With Cambid's Library getting first try on all bumps, which are luck-based, this meant to beat Cambid's time, you not only had to play amazingly, you also had to get lucky on Library. No one was beating Cambid's time without a lot of attempts. On the Easy side of things, Nervy Destroyer had taken a break for a little while, but came back to try and cut his Easy time even lower. During one of his D-Rust streams only a few days after coming back, Nervy had the run of his life. On June 22nd, 2023, he brought Easy down to 103.30, once again faster than Legendary. And make no mistake, the difficulty is called Easy, but Nervy's time is ridiculous. If you watch Nervy play, he's crazy good at the game, and this run shows off an insane amount of skill and dedication. Nervy's 103.30 is still the Easy record today. Meanwhile, Cambid was protesting the Master Chief Collection due to a bug that had persisted for months without being fixed, and wasn't looking to break his Legendary record anytime soon. Unless someone else who was really good at the game was willing to step up and try to beat Cambid's time, it wasn't going anywhere. But there was someone, and that person was Sloth SG. Sloth's personal best at the start of 2023 was 104.52. Starting in April, Sloth started working to catch up to Cambid's time. He cut down to 104.19, then 104.07, then one of the runs of all time happened.
Alright, there goes record right now. We are almost tied with the record. We're 3 seconds off record, dude.
He was 3 seconds off of Cambid's time. Worth noting, this run had a third try carrier bump. There was still plenty more time for Sloth to cut, and 12 days later, he did cut it.
Oh my god, dude. 1 second off.
1 second behind Cambid. This run should have beaten Cambid, but after the first bump out of bounds on Moss, Sloth fell back in on accident and had to do Cafe Bump. So again, there was still plenty of time for Sloth to cut. On August 3rd, Sloth started a new run that was going okay until TNR. At one point, Mr. Monopoly asked Sloth in the chat, "Is this actually world record?" as a meme, to which Sloth replied,
It's actually no, this is really fucking slow.
But Sloth stayed fairly close to world record pace on his way to Library. He got a first try carrier bump. He got a first try dark door. He lost a bit of time on light bump and had a fast last door. Sloth matched Cambid's Library and was now ahead of world record pace. But with all the miraculous ways Sloth had come up just short previously, surely something else would go wrong this run.
It's false. No way. Not this time. Pure fiction.
We hit barrels, sub 103.30. Holy shit.
Sloth did lose a bit of time in the last 3 levels, but it didn't matter. Just like that, with the 103.29, Sloth was the world record holder, and CE Legendary went to its second new runner after Garish's domination. This also meant Legendary was once again faster than Easy. Sloth's run was incredible. I mentioned the Garish run that the Halo devs reacted to and were blown away by earlier. This was almost 3 minutes faster than that. And outside of stair skip and carrier bump, there weren't any other tricks that weren't done in that Garish run. As great as Garish was at combat and consistently pulling off tricks, Sloth and Cambid are that much better. Sloth's run still wasn't perfect though. He wasn't lying to Monopoly when he said it was really slow early on. Compared to what Sloth and Cambid are capable of getting, it was. A fast TNR split for them is below 21 minutes in the 2050 range. Sloth exited TNR with a 21:29, meaning there was a lot of time to save in the early game. This would still require a great library with a lot of luck. But with MCC receiving a new update at the end of July and Sloth beating his time, Cambid got back on the grind. On August 20th, Cambid started a new run that began well. He left Halo with the sub 14 split, which meant a sub 21 TNR split was possible, and with a TNR that had virtually no mistakes, he did it. After not choking the next 3 levels, he was on the Library. Whether or not this could record was going to come down to the flood bumps. He got a first try carrier bump. He got a first try dark door. He had a fast light bump, but a slow last door. That didn't matter though, because Cambid was 41 seconds green out of Library. Now he just needed to finish the run without any major screw-ups. He lost a bit of time on keys on the mob, but it didn't matter. Cambid finished with a 103.11, which 3 months later at the time of me uploading this is still the world record and a really incredible run. It still isn't unbeatable with current strats, however to get to 102, it would more than likely take a really risky 2 betrayal strat called no deload. This is where, instead of deloading the enemies at the start and flying up to hit the button again, you'd spawn the enemies from the beginning and fight your way down without stopping. Sloth is once again trying to beat Cambid's time, and he has had splits as fast as minus 50 out of TNR. However, the other part of the equation is still library luck, and it hasn't gone his way yet, but Sloth is once again right behind Cambid. I've been talking about Sloth and Cambid, but they aren't the only great CE runners at the moment. Garish still streams on his Twitch about once a week, but since he stopped his serious grind, his time has been beaten by a few people. The number 1 and 2 on the legendary leaderboard are Cambid and Sloth. 3rd place is Helpless with a 105.15. In 4th place is Nervy Destroyer with a 105.16. Garish is at 5th place with a 105.33. Another runner, Zoo, who's the world record holder for Classic Halo 2 Legendary and former world record holder for Halo 2 MCC and Halo 3 Legendary, has started playing CE and his best time is currently 107.12. So if he keeps going, he's probably going to pass Garish as well. But it's important to note that times are cool and those who get them deserve the credit for being awesome, but getting these times isn't a one-person thing. The strats and tricks used were developed over years by many people, both people finding them to begin with, and then runners actually using them and finding the fastest ways to implement them into runs. Without new tricks, sub 1 hour probably isn't possible in either difficulty, but there's still new tricks being discovered, and you never know when something unexpected will happen. You could be like Joshington messing around with a different trick, messing it up, and uncovering Banshee teleports. If you're interested in learning how to do Halo speedruns yourself, CE or otherwise, check out haloruns.com and join the Discord. There's runners who would love to help you in tutorials for everything you might want to learn. And if you enjoyed this video, then click the video on screen to watch me do a deep dive on Cody Miller's awful GDQ run. I'll catch you next time.